Good morning. You're tuned into Golfe TV Africa. Welcome to today's news edition. I am Itunu, SHONEYE. Here's the news and details. I'll be starting off from the national scene. The day after the festivities marking Benin's 63rd independence, the Amazon Square is still bustling with activity. Visitors gather around the monument to admire the meticulously crafted architecture. More details in the report. Activities are being held in the Amazon Square until the other activities on the agenda can be completed. The official grandstand is still in place. However, the visits are continuing as a sign of the African Renaissance. The Amazon Square remains a symbol for Benin and Africa, according to Boubacar Diallo, a Senegalese national. Taking advantage of the holiday, Mrs. Genevieve gave her children the pleasure of viewing the statue, including Meva, who was delighted and praised the architectural work that had been done.
Je voulais venir à cet endroit depuis un moment, mais j'ai pas pu. Et j'ai voulu venir ici au lendemain des 63e anniversaire de l'indépendance avec les enfants.
I wanted to come to this place for a while, but I couldn't. And I wanted to come here on the day after the 63rd anniversary of independence with the children so that they could see for themselves the location and the statue of the Amazon. I can see that the place is really beautiful and the statue is very beautiful.
Je suis venue aujourd'hui pour visiter l'Amazon et j'ai trouvé que l'Amazon est très sécurisée.
I have come here today to see the Amazon statue, and I found out that the location of the Amazon is very secured and very clean. And I also found out that the Amazon was a great author and that the President of the Republic is doing a great job. This place is kept in good condition. It is a work that is attracting attention all over the world, as the people of Benin can testify. It should also be remembered that the Amazon Square welcomes several hundred visitors every day under the protection of the Defense and Security Forces who ensure the protection of the infrastructure. Moving on to Nigeria, about the NLC strike, that is the Nigerian Labour Union Congress. Barely 24 hours after meeting with President Bola Tinubu, where an agreement was reached to call off their protest, the rapprochement between the organized labor and the federal government appeared to have collapsed as the unions on Thursday night vowed to embark on a nationwide strike from August 14 if their leaders were summoned for contempt of court orders. The Nigerian Labour Congress hinged its decision on the contempt of court application filed by the Federal Ministry of Justice against the labor leaders on Wednesday. Now, in a bid to avert a strike by the labor movement last month, the federal government of Nigeria had, through the Federal Ministry of Justice, secured an order from the National Industrial Court restraining the NLC and the Trade Union Congress from embarking on any strike action over issues bordering on removal of fuel subsidy, hike in prices of petrol, and consequential increase in the cost of living, pending the determination of the suits. Now, away from that and still on the Nigerian scene, in Delta State, Nigeria, the Governor Sheriff Oborevori on Thursday indicted the management of the General Hospital Odan, Lagos Island, over the death of Dr. Ware DSO, who lost her life when the hospital's elevator crashed on Tuesday. It was reported that DSO lost her life while using the elevator to get her food from a dispatch rider when the incident happened. Oborevori, in a statement by his chief press secretary, Festus Ahos, said DSO, a native of Ewo Kingdom in the Ughelli South local government area of the state, died because the hospital management failed to maintain their facilities. He therefore called on the Lagos state government and the police to investigate the matter thoroughly to forestall a recurrence. The statement read, "While we mourn her unfortunate and unavoidable death, the hospital management failed in their duty to maintain facilities at the hospital, which caused her untimely death." Away from the Nigerian scene and moving on to Niger, the coup in Niger adds to a growing list of military-led administration in the South region. More details in the reports. Niger's President Mohamed Bazoum was elected 2 years ago in the first peaceful democratic transfer of power since independence in 1960. On the 26th of July 2023, a coup d'etat occurred in Niger in which Niger's Presidential Guard detained President Mohamed Bazoum and Presidential Guard Commander General Abdurrahman Chiani proclaimed themselves the leader of a new transitional government, saying that the insecurity, economic woes and corruption led him to seize power. Presidential Guard forces closed the country's borders, suspended state institutions and declared a curfew. Bazoum supporters gathered outside the National Assembly and took to the streets after he was detained by members of the Presidential Guard. But security forces fired warning shots in Niamey as protesters marched towards the presidential palace. The military takeover marks the 7th coup in West and Central Africa since 2020. On the streets, there's evidence of further support for the coup leaders and a desire to steer away from the West and towards Russia. For some coup supporters, the anti-French sentiment is being replaced by pro-Russian messaging. It comes after neighboring countries Mali and Burkina Faso shifted their alliances to Moscow. The coup has been widely condemned by the international community. Russia has joined with the international calls to release President Bazoum, calls which are growing louder as Niger's uncertain future risks descending a country into further chaos. Still in Niger, thousands of people rallied on Thursday in Niger's capital in support of the coup that toppled the democratically elected government as security concerns mounted among Western nations. Now, demonstrators in the heart of Niamey, some brandishing giant Russian flags, chanted anti-French slogans at the rally, called to mark the anniversary of the West African nation's 1960 independence from France. More details in the report.
Thousands of people rallied on Thursday in Niger's capital in support of the coup that toppled the democratically elected government as security concerns mounted among Western nations. Demonstrators in the heart of Niamey, some brandishing giant Russian flags, chanted anti-French slogans at the rally called to mark the anniversary of the West African nation's 1960 independence from France. Isiaka Hamoud, one of the protesters, stated that only the security that interests us, irrespective of whether it comes from Russia, China or Turkey, that is the one they will support because he feels they want to help his country. The crowd at the rally around him was shouting, "Down with France, long live Russia, long live Vladimir Putin." A week after the toppling of elected President Mohamed Bazoum, European citizens have been evacuating from Niger, which has had a key role in French and Western strategies in combating a jihadist insurgency that has plagued the Sahelian area since 2012. The clock is ticking down on Sunday's ultimatum from West African Regional Bloc ECOWAS for the coup leaders to restore Bazoum to power within a week or face the possible last resort of military intervention. Niger is the fourth member of the group to undergo a coup since 2020. Senegal stated on Thursday that it will send soldiers to join ECOWAS if it decided to intervene militarily in Niger.
Still on the African scene, moving on to Senegal. Senegal said that on Thursday it will participate if the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, decides to intervene militarily in Niger following last week's coup. Foreign Minister Aissata Tall Sol told reporters during a government press briefing in the capital, Dakar, that there had been one coup too many in the region and cited Senegal's international commitments. More details in the report.
Senegal stated on Thursday, the 3rd of August 2023, that it will participate if the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, decides to intervene militarily in Niger following last week's coup. Foreign Minister Aissata Talsan told reporters during a government press briefing in the capital Dakar that there had been one coup too many in the region and cited Senegal's international commitment. Senegalese soldiers for all these reasons will go there, she stated. Regional bloc ECOWAS has threatened potential use of force if the military junta does not restore ousted President Mohamed Bazoum by Sunday. Niger is the fourth member of the bloc to undergo a coup since 2020. The military chiefs of ECOWAS member countries met in Nigeria on Wednesday for 3 days of consultations. Talsal said Senegal was obligated to go along with ECOWAS's decision, but she added, Senegal's conviction is that these coups must be stopped. That is why we are going there. She also raised the questions of why ECOWAS would send troops to Niger when it had not done so in Mali, Guinea or Burkina Faso following coups in these countries. To give a simple answer, because it is one coup too many, she said. But she added, the real reason was that ECOWAS wanted to do everything it could to negotiate with those countries on the timeline for returning power to elected civilians. Tal Sali also criticized the argument used by the junta in the Sahel that it had needed to seize power in order to advance the fight against jihadism.
Away from that, and still on the African scene, a news and brief in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa on Thursday inaugurated a Chinese-funded power station that he said will go a long way in easing power shortages ahead of the national elections. Mnangagwa, 80, who is seeking a second presidential term on August 23, has been on the ribbon-cutting spree as he attempts to portray himself as a go-getter and reassure voters about the state of the economy. He opened a coal mine on Monday and a clinic on Wednesday before heading to the northwestern town of Hwange to officially launch the 600-megawatt coal-fired power plant on Thursday. Analysts expect a tense vote later this month amid a crackdown on the opposition and a disaffected population battling hyperinflation, poverty, and high unemployment. Addressing supporters at the local stadium after the opening, Mnangagwa said the new plant will be a critical enabler of development, adding Zimbabwe was open for business. The landlocked southern African country has for years been reeling under severe power shortages that at their worst late last year left millions of people in the dark for up to 19 hours a day. Away from that and moving to Ghana, batik making is a popular form of art and a source of income for many women in Ghana. The art of batik has been around for many centuries, but in the middle of foreign textile flooding the market, the traditional handmade batik is still cherished by many people.
Edwina Assan has been creating batik fabrics for nearly 30 years. She trains women and girls in indigenous batik making at her textile factory in Winneba in the central region of Ghana.
We are always coming up with different designs and different arrangements, and then of course different colors.
The process starts with the waxing of a cotton fabric. A motif is dipped in hot melted wax and then stamped on the white piece of cloth. Each design is unique, from the Ghanaian symbols known as Edinkra to abstract designs.
I usually take them from natural objects. Sometimes I take Edinkra and modify it. Sometimes I just create from knowledge or even from geometric shapes.
The waxed cotton fabric is then dipped in a dye to produce the desired color. It is later passed through hot water to remove the wax, which then reveals the design of the fabric. After the wax is removed, the cloth is then hung to dry. The entire process of making batik can take several hours, depending on how long the fabric will need to be and the number of colors being used. Ghana's textile industry contributes about 3% of the country's GDP. The domestic market is awash with cheap mass-produced foreign prints. So the locally produced fabrics like batik face stiff competition in terms of pricing. Still, some Ghanaians believe there is a market for it.
We use it for dresses and stuff like that, shirts and all that. But the foreigners, when they come in, they have varieties they pick varieties of it, and they have different uses of it. Some of them would want to use it as a curtain, as a bedspread, as a napkin, some of them also as a tablecloth.
Back at Edwina's factory, she believes the local production of batik fabric needs to be preserved to promote Ghanaian culture and tradition.
This is a unique area. We've had this done in Indonesia, where it is known to have started for several centuries, and they are still making money out of it, even though we have the factories. So I think it's another way for Ghana to make money out of our hand-painted fabrics.
As she gets more creative with her designs, Edwina hopes to pass on her batik making skills by training women and creating jobs for young people.
And on the international scene, some group of students landed in California this week and is busy learning what it is to operate in a competitive high-tech and startup environment. They also attended sessions at the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching to hear how Silicon Valley approaches issues of smart agriculture, among other topics. More details in the report.
Silicon Valley, first of all, is such a very resourceful place to be in, because almost everything you need is here. And I think we are learning a lot from the tech experts or different types of entrepreneurs that have failed and have made it in their journey so far. My takeaway would be, I think they have created this entrepreneurship ecosystem and leadership ecosystem that is really supportive of one another. And most important, I think they are willing to invest in new, fresh ideas that, of course, seem to be very sustainable and very innovative.
Newspaper.
And I think my takeaway would be, this is really a very resourceful place to be in, because you cannot lack anything that you might need to have. At the moment, I think it's high time that African learning institutions, especially higher learning institutions, they started to invest much into the skills-based learning style, right? For example, this is what the African Leadership University has invested in. So we are learning more about the 21st century skills. And I think these are skills that are needed for the present and the future, because the world is changing, right? And I think it's high time that they transformed the education system to focus much on the skills that are going to help us young people to become very innovative entrepreneurial leaders. And of course, I think it's high time also different types of governments, they invest much in like young people. As I said before, that what makes Silicon Valley to be very unique, what I've observed so far, is how resourceful it is, right? Because some of the challenges that we encounter, many of us young people back home in Africa, is maybe lack of resources, right? So I think if different types of learning institutions can really be on a journey to transform the way they teach people, I think that will be something that can cause a very huge positive difference, right? And I think it's very important for them to create or to tailor their educations to the user-centered desires, right? Because most of these institutions, for example, they still, for example, are learning in an odd way, right? And by that, I'm talking about traditional universities. So I think the better way to really provide high quality education that can lead to us students or young people of the African continent to become innovative, to create innovative solutions to some of Africa's present challenges. I think it's about focusing much on the skills, because these skills are the ones that, for example, even in the employment sector now, or the job market, that's what they look for now. They do not really necessarily, for example, look at the papers that you have. They focus much on the skills. What is it that you've learned or you've mastered throughout your learning journey? So if the education can be centered around developing students with skills, I think that is something that can help us.
You're still tuned into Golfe TV Africa, and my name is Itunu. Here it's time for the newspaper review, where we'll review all of the various headlines on various African newspapers. I'll be starting off from the Punch Nigeria. On the front page of the Punch Nigeria, the front page here, it says, Federal Government Labour Talks Collapse. NLC begins strike on August 14. Concerning all of the protests by the Nigeria Labour Congress, the federal government and the NLC, their talk has not yielded a good result. So the Nigerian Labour Congress has said that they will commence with a strike on August 14. Why the Labour made a U-turn on agreements reached with Tinubu on subsidy removal. Because of the fuel subsidy removal, there's been a lot of hardship and complaints from the Nigerian citizens that things hasn't been going on well for them. So that is why the Nigerian Labour Congress has decided to go on a strike. But we hope that the federal government of Nigeria is going to, be in talks with the Nigerian Labour Congress so that it can come in agreement and, make things easier for the labor in Nigeria. Now, away from that and moving on to PDP, ALP mock APC as NAC rectifies Ganduje party chair. Another story here says father of siblings killed by collapsed hotel fence demands justice. That you can find on page 4 and page 5 of the Punch Nigeria. Now, another story here says that the federal government begins no work, no pay for striking doctors. You can also find that on page 7 of the Punch newspaper. Now, the last story I'll be taking on the Punch newspaper here says new public service rules many force out 512 directors. That you can find on the page 2 of the Punch Nigeria newspaper. To read all of the stories on the front pages, to get more details on that, you can just click on the Punch newspaper Nigeria and get all of the stories. And away from the Punch newspaper, moving on to another story in the Punch newspaper. Pardon me. Moving on to the Nation newspaper. No. Moving on to the Nation newspaper, Nigeria. This is the Nation Nigeria. On the front page of the Nation Nigeria, the news here says that Ganduje, let me erase this so that we can see clearly. Yes, so it says here that Ganduje, pardon me. Yes, the front page of the Nation newspaper, on this, it says here that Ganduje pledges reform, fairness to reposition APC. That you can also find on the front page of the Nation Nigeria. Another story, interesting story here, says that, let me extend that, NSA probes another vessel held with stolen crude. You can also find that on the front page of the Nation Nigeria. Another story on the front page of the Nation Nigeria, it says here that former governor Senate step in and Tinubu, let's fulfill our promises. It's just a story. It says here that NWC gets flats to fill 6 vacant posts. You can find all of the story. I'm just taking the headlines on the pages of the Nation's newspaper. So to read more details on that, you can go to the Nation Nigeria and get more details on that. Away from the Nation Nigeria and moving to the Sun Namibia, away from the Nation Nigeria and moving to the Sun Namibia, the headlines on the Sun Namibia this morning says, it says here that Namco Oil's Mulunga disciplinary machinery that you can find on the front page of the Sun Namibia. Another story here, there's not a lot of story on the Sun Namibia this morning, but another story here says, Zambia's still talking about a salary. I think that there's been a whole lot of, increment of salary and the labor unions of different African nations. So I'll be moving away from the Sun Namibia because there's not a whole lot of story on the front pages of the Sun Namibia. And moving on to the Daily News Zimbabwe, here it says, I will extend this for a clearer view. On the Daily News Zimbabwe, highlighting this headline, it says here that ZANU-PF is toast Mafume predicts. It says that CCC will get 2/3 party majority after the polls. That you can find on the front pages of the Daily News Zimbabwe. Pardon me. Now, another story here says Waverly Blankets PVT. I'll highlight that here. It says Waverly Blankets PVT Limited. You can also find that on the front page of the Daily News Zimbabwe. The last story I'll be taking on the Daily News Zimbabwe here says government plans to export power. So to read all of the stories on the front pages of the Daily News Zimbabwe, you can go check out the stories to get more details about that. Away from the Daily News Zimbabwe and moving on to the front page Liberia. That will be the last paper I'll be reading today. This will be the last paper for today. On the front page in Liberia this morning, it says here, now, highlighting the major headline here, it says, desecrating the Governance Commission. Ruling party urged to respect the law of Liberia as it names head of integrity institution on its national campaign team. That you can find on the front pages of the front page Liberia. And another interesting story here says that, let me highlight that, it says that putting the economy, education, pardon me, it just says putting the economy, so you can find that on the front page Liberia. And another story here says, Vivian has legal rights over me. So to read all of the stories on the front page Liberia today, you can go check it out and read all of the story. So this is where we'll be ending today's newspaper review. And you're still tuned into Golfe TV Africa. And this is where we'll say goodbye and end today's newspaper review. We've come to the end of today's newspaper review. My name is Itunu SHONEYE. Enjoy the rest of your day.
La Gazette du Golfe, au plus près de l'événement 7 jours sur 7 et 24 heures sur 24. C'est aussi